guys, welcome back to the channel. Currently driving through Los Angeles on my way to Hustler Casino for another edition of the bounty game. Now, I've covered the bounty game a few times already on the channel, but essentially what it is, just regular Hold'em, except it's way different because we all start the game by putting a select amount of money into the middle. This creates the bounty pool. Today, it's gonna be $12,500 per player, which I think will amount to $100K in the middle. The way you win some of this bounty money is by winning a few hands in a row, winning with 7 deuce, showing a bluff, stuff like that. Of course, it's designed to generate action, which it always does. The last couple times I played it, it went rather well for me, and I'm hoping tonight it's more of the same. I'll include the exact rules right here in case anyone's wondering. So bear these in mind as you watch these hands coming up. There's a lot of action, needless to say. Fingers crossed, let's get to the casino, and I'll talk to you guys after the session. Guys, here we are playing the bounty game at Hustler Casino Live. $100,000 in the bounty pool, and the way we start off the bounty game is with a 5K flip. That means each player puts in $5,000. We each get 2 random cards and run out the board. Whoever wins takes down the 35K. After that, the buy-in structure is match the stack, which means that we can all buy up to $35,000. If whoever has the most chips increases that amount, then you can match that stack. I'm sure you're all familiar with a match the stack buy-in structure. Anyway, in that flip, I've got 10 deuce suited. Unfortunately, we don't win. 9's full takes it down, and we move on to the second hand. This one's a little more normal, but not much better. I've got 9-6 offsuit. That is one of the bounty hands tonight, which means if I'm able to win this pot, I can take down $2,000 out of the bounty pool. So when there's a raise to 300 from early position, I'm going to try to win. I make it 1,000 on the button. Back around to Stu now, and against my re-raise, he decides to take a stand and put in another raise to $3,100. Of course, I've got 9 high, a pretty bad 9 high as well. So folding is probably okay, but he started with $10,000, and I figured we can't be in terrible shape if he's got 2 overcards. And also, if he's bluffing, we can get folds from hands like the one he's got. So I jam all in, knowing damn right it's probably not the best idea, but trying to set the tone for the night that we're here to have fun and gamble it up a little bit. And plus, if he folds, I'm not going to be too upset, of course. However, after a bit of thought, despite not loving the situation, Stu does not fold. He gambles with King 10 of diamonds, so we're off to a run out. 20,000 in the middle, and of course, an additional 2,000 for me if we win. And we get lucky on the flop. It's Jack 9-3, so we've got middle pair. Looking to dodge a king, a 10, or of course a queen, but the turn shatters all my dreams. He makes a straight right away. We're drawing dead on the river, and just like that, we are down $10,000 to start the night, plus the $5,000 from the flip, so we've got our work cut out for us. In the next hand, I limp blind under the gun. Not recommended, but just trying to have some fun here. I toss in the 100 first to act. Before looking at my cards, of course, Dennis raises to 500 in middle position. Brown Balla calls in the big blind with Jack deuce suited. Not sure what he's up to, but I've got Jack 10 suited. I'm going to put in the squeeze. It's a playable hand, and of course, I could have any 2 cards, many of which might be good, so I make it $3,000. Dennis makes the call in position. Brown Balla makes the disciplined fold, and we go heads up to a flop of Jack 8-7 rainbow. Pretty good board for me. I've got top pair with a straight drop, but all things considered, this is generally going to favor Dennis more than me, and checking top pair out of position is a good strategy from time to time, so I'm going to implement that here. I check it over to him. He puts in a bet of 2,000. No point folding, no point raising, so I make the call, and we make a straight on the turn. It's the 9 of diamonds. Great situation because I'm almost never going to have a 10, and Dennis should know that, which means that he's probably going to try to bluff this pot away from me. It's not going to work though. I check, he bets 6,000, and I am going nowhere. I make the call, and we see a brick on the river. It's the deuce of spades. I check it again. Dennis does not. He assembles another wager around 17,000, or actually I forget the exact amount, but it doesn't matter. I call right away. Don't want to raise in case we're up against queen 10. Turns out we're chopping it versus ace 10 of diamonds, so we were in pretty good shape on the flop, and what looked like a good turn card is actually kind of unlucky as we end up chopping this one. Moving right along, in this next hand, Carl opens up the action to $3,000. Some players here were raising to really big amounts pre-flop. I think that's because, actually, I'm not even going to pretend to know why, but he makes it 3,000. I'm on the button with Jack 10 suited and decide it's worth a call. We're not super deep, and his open size is so large that probably folding is the better play, but I call. Everyone else folds, so we go heads up to a flop of queen 10-6. That's middle pair and a backdoor straight draw for me. Not great, but not terrible. Carl continues with a bet of $2,500, and we see an interesting turn card. It's the 8 of diamonds. So we do improve to a straight draw, but the obvious flush has gotten there as well. However, Carl raised so big pre-flop, and he's out of position, so I expect that he's not going to have flushes too often. Even the times he does, he might occasionally check them. So I'm very surprised when he jams all in for a more than double pot-sized bet. Very odd, not something I saw coming at all, but at this point my hand's pretty bad, so I just let it go, and it turns out we were up against top 2 pair. So nice hand, Carl. Can't win a pot today, it seems. Let's see if we can figure it out with the worst possible starting hand, 3 deuce offsuit. Now you might be thinking, isn't 7 deuce the worst starting hand? Well, yeah, but not in this game because there's a $2,000 bounty if you win with 7 deuce. So I think that means 3 deuce offsuit is the worst hand possible. Carl raises to $400. I decide to get spicy for the LOLs, make it $2,000 to go. And now Dylan on my left jams all in for just under 10K. Everyone folds and it's back to me. Now, do we really want to call an all-in with 3 deuce offsuit? Of course not. But it's Dylan, it's Hustler Casino Live, here to gamble a little bit, and if he's got 2 overcards, it would be pretty funny if we managed to win. So I make the call. Not recommended, just telling the story of how my night went. Off to a run out versus Dylan, all in pre-flop. He's got ace-jack offsuit. That is good news. All we wanted to hear is that he doesn't have a pair. We flop bottom pair and river 2 pair. That's how you get it done. The dirty diaper, as this hand is called, comes through, and we take down this $20,000 pot. Kind of embarrassing. I try to play good cards and can't win, and then I play terrible cards and we win. Poker's really weird sometimes. Moving right along, in this next hand, I've got King 7 offsuit. Now, you might be wondering what's going on with the pre-flop selection of hands today. And in this situation, I think there's more of an excuse because, as you guys can see, I've got 3 yellow buttons in front of me. That means that I've won 3 hands in a row. If I'm able to win 5 hands in a row, I win $100,000 because that's how much is in the bounty pool. Well, at this point, there was a little bit less, maybe somewhere around $95,000. If I'm able to win this particular hand, I get $8,000 because that would have been 4 in a row. So it's a pretty awesome situation to be in. What's not awesome is King 7 offsuit. This is how things get tricky during the bounty game, and that's kind of the whole point of it. But anyway, I raise it up to $8,000, trying to maximize folds from the table, and it almost works until it gets to the blinds. Carl's got an ace and decides the hell with it. He's all in for around 45K. Brown Balla now thinks for a bit. He's got 10K left. He says, whatever, I'm all in too. Now it's back to me, and it's 40,000 to call into a pot that's around 66,000. So we've got to do some math. 40K into a pot that's 66K. But it's not just these direct odds. We also got to think about the chances of winning this hand somehow, and then getting the $8,000 that we are guaranteed from this one, plus the chance to get those 90,000 or so dollars the following hand. So a lot at stake here. I think it's close, actually, with a hand as bad as King 7. We're getting very good odds versus any unpaired cards that don't include a king. And that means ace queen, ace jack, queen 10, ace 9 offsuit, all these sorts of holdings. I think it's a clear call. Now, if we're up against even a pocket pair that's below the king, I think it's still worth it. What I don't want to see is king queen or ace king, anything like that. But we're going to gamble. I do a little bit of calculation in my head and toss in the money. And we're in decent shape, 31%. Brown Balla's got 32%. Carl's got 37%. A fair fight. And this is exactly what I was hoping for. Everyone has live cards. Let's see what happens. No one pairs up on the flop. No one pairs up on the turn. River's a 10. Sad outcome here. Brown baller gets a triple up. You can see he's quite happy about that. So we have to pay him out, but then I gotta pay Carl, who wins the side pot against me since he's got ace 9 and I've got king 7. Ace high beats king high. So what could have been an awesome situation turns out to be pretty lame for me. We are now stuck a good chunk, going for glory, but instead end up losing the maximum with king 7 offsuit. That's how the bounty game goes sometimes. Moving on, we've got our work cut out for us. Let's see if we can get back to normal with pocket 9s. That is a real hand, bounty game or not. In this one, there's a raise to 200, and then Stu re-raises to 500. Kind of weird. Brown baller calls on the button. He cold calls a re-raise. I think that's probably not the strongest hand. And then Stu made it pretty small, which I think probably isn't the strongest hand ever. So with pocket 9s in the small blind, I put in the squeeze. I make it 3,000 to go. Stu gets out of the way, but brown baller calls again. So we're going heads up to a flop of 10-6-5 with a flush draw. I start with a check. This is kind of a board where I'm happy to pot control with 9s. Could occasionally bet, I think, but checking seems a little bit better, so that's what I do. Brown baller checks it back, which I'm happy to see, and the king of clubs comes on the turn. It's a little bit scary since it's an overcard, but in essence, I think this is a brick. Given the pre-flop action, I highly doubt brown baller is going to have a king super often, and this is also a card I would bluff pretty frequently on, so I decide to put in a bet, thinking it's a good card to lead out on. Don't want to go too big though. I bet around a third pot, 2,300. Brown baller thinks for a bit and makes the call, and we're off to a river, which is the 7 of clubs. I think you could bet or check here with pocket 9s. I think I like around a half pot bet, but in the moment I check it over, and now brown baller bets around half pot, 5,300. Tough spot now with 9s. We don't have a diamond, which is pretty good. We have no removal to miss flush draws. We also have 2 9s, which is removal to the nut straight, and of course 9-8, 9-8 suited, hands like that. So I think the properties of my hand make it a call. That said, how often is brown baller really going to be bluffing this situation, especially for this size? I don't know. Not too often, I think. We're getting a good price. Not too many bluffs. It's tough. It's a close spot. In the end, I decide to call, keep brown baller honest, and it turns out that is the wrong decision. Perhaps a little bit of frustration creeping in from the way the night has gone so far, but I don't hate the call too much. Nice hand, brown baller. We lose this one as well, getting unlucky on the river, and move on to this next hand where I've got ace queen suited. Another great hand pre-flop. I raise it to 300. Dylan calls on my left. He's also got king 7 suited, but he's on a run of trying to collect bounties. And then Dennis puts in the squeeze to 1,500 in middle position. He's got 9-6 offsuit. Back around to me, and considering how the night's been going, Dennis has been very active, and I've got a real hand this time, so I'm going to pounce on this. I make it 4,500 to go now. Back to Dylan, who folds. Dennis, after a bit of thought, makes the call. He's got position, but that's about it. His hand kind of sucks. Let's see what happens on the flop. 10-8-8 with 2 diamonds. We've got 2 overcards and the nut flush draw. That is a good flop for me, ladies and gentlemen. But let's see who's going to win this one, right? Lots of poker still left to be played. I make it $3,000. And now Dennis ponders his options and decides a raise is the way to go. And I guess it makes sense, you know, if you're going to call pre-flop with 9-6 offsuit and then miss the flop, you got to try to win somehow, right? He makes it 11,000. Unfortunately for him, I've got a hand that is going nowhere just yet. I do a little bit of accounting of my stack, thinking about what the best choices are. And I think, of course, the standard call is preferred. But once in a blue moon, putting in the 3-bet on this flop doesn't seem that bad, but I decide not to go down that rabbit hole. I just make the call, and we're off to a turn, which is the 7 of clubs. Doesn't look great to me, but as you guys can see from the graphics, it's really bad. He turns a straight out of nowhere. Of course, he's quite happy to see this, I'd imagine. I check it again, and now he bets $25,000. I think at this point we don't have much choice but to fold. Sure, sometimes we'll be getting bluffed, but I just have a lot of better hands to continue with. We block his flush draws. We don't block full houses and trips and stuff like that. So yeah, I just get out of the way. Turns out I got pretty unlucky in this hand as well. But all right, the night is young, so yeah, we're stuck a good amount. But lots of poker left to be played, which is always the bright side. In this one, there's a raise pre-flop, 1 or 2 callers. I've got jacks. That's all I know. I raise it up to 2350. Back around to Stu now. He's a pre-flop raiser. He jams all in for 11,000. I, of course, make the call. And this is finally a good situation. We got jacks versus 10s, and we hold. So 22k pot going our way. A little step back towards the right direction. Let's see if we can build on this momentum. And what better hand to do that with than pocket aces? This one, there's a raise and a re-raise before it even gets to me. Love to see it. Of course, I'm going to play this one straightforward. Not the type of game you want to get too fancy in, so I put in the 4-bet. I make it $4,600 to go. Back around to Carl now, who folds, but Brown Balla makes the call out of position. 7-6 of hearts has treated him well against me tonight. Let's see if he can do it again. It's going to be tough this time, though, because I've got number 1, pocket aces, off to a flop, which is an action flop. King, Jack, 9 with 2 hearts. He's got a flush draw, but this is a board that's heavily going to favor me. Of course, I'm going to keep betting since I've got a really good hand. It ain't rocket science. I put in 2,700. Brown Balla decides to just call with a flush draw, and he picks up even more outs on the turn. The 8 of diamonds. That means he's got a straight draw and a flush draw. He checks, and I decide to size up a little bit here. 11,300, around 2/3 the size of the pot. Back around to him now, and he thinks it over for quite some time, obviously debating whether to raise or just call. The problem with just calling is that if you miss, you are now stuck on the river, out of position, without the betting lead, and you have 7 high. So that's never too fun, but the problem with raising is you might just be getting it in bad versus a set or a hand like the one I've got here. So yeah, I don't blame him for taking his time, but in the end he decides to just call and try to get lucky, which he does. It's the 3 of hearts. So once again, we find some misfortune. What sucks even more is that I've got the ace of hearts, which I was keenly aware of. So I figured if the hearts get there and he decides to lead out, it's the perfect bluff catching combination of aces. He could have 9-10 suited, 9-7 suited, all sorts of mysterious holdings that decide to bluff the river, and we lose to very few hands. Even flushes aren't going to be too common since the king of hearts is out there and I've got the ace of hearts. So when he does lead out on this river, I quickly make the call. And it turns out to be one of those situations as he shows me the bad news. Frustrating hand here because I thought finally we were going to get things going back towards the good side where we're winning instead of losing chips, but perhaps it's just not my night. We are down around $90,000 at this point or something. This hand stung for sure, but the opportunities keep coming. Here we see ace 5 suited. Carl opens to 600. I put in the re-raise to 2,400 and he makes the call. So off to a flop, which comes down king 5-5. Pretty damn good when you re-raise pre-flop with ace 5 and flop trips. Of course, I'm going to keep betting. I bet 2,000. He makes the call. Fingers crossed that he's got a king, but as you guys can see here, no such luck for me. He checks the turn. It's the queen of hearts. Plenty of bluffs I might have, so of course I'm going to continue betting with an actual good hand. I size up this time, making it $15,000 to go. We'll do the same thing with like ace 10, jack 10 suited, ace 4, all sorts of garbage. So yeah, 15,000. Carl thinks for a bit. I'm praying that somehow he's got something, but he lets go of his ace high. Still happy to take this one down, but of course wish the pot had been a bit bigger. Here we see a limp from Jungle Man. I look down at queen 10 suited in the cutoff. The straddle is on, so I raise it up to $1,400. Gets back to Dennis in the small blind, and he puts in the re-raise to 6,000. Pretty standard so far. Open at 1,200, raise to 6,000. Of course, I'm going to call with position and a playable hand. Flop comes down ace 7-6. No straight draw, no flush draw, no pair for me. So I got to fold once he bets 8,000. But just like that, $6,000 down the drain. It's kind of crazy how quickly the money goes when the stakes are high. But then again, when you're winning, it's kind of crazy how quickly you can win ridiculous amounts of money. Not the case here. Just an example of how swingy the game was for me. You know, random hands like these happened all night long where I would raise and miss the flop or call a re-raise and miss again. So yeah, 6,000 gone here. And this brings us to this hand where we are playing the stand-up game now, and I am one of 2 remaining players who needs to win a hand. Just can't get it done tonight, it seems. Now, if you take a look around the table, Stu and I, we need these buttons. I'm going to try to get it with Jack 8 offsuit. I raise it up pre-flop and get called by Brown Balla and Dennis. Yeah, I've got Jack 8 offsuit, but King 9 deuce isn't the worst board ever. Sometimes I'd check top pair or middle pair though, so I decide to check it and try to bluff later on, thinking that might look a little more believable. Turn card's a deuce, which looks pretty good to me. I now bet 1,100. Dennis calls behind me with ace high. Brown baller gets out of the way, and we see another king on the river. Now, this is a spot where I would want to value bet many hands. I would also want to bluff quite often, so I think the play is to bet. In terms of sizing, I think an overbet also makes sense. This kind of board texture generally favors me more than him, and we want to give a bad price to all potential ace highs or higher flush draws that could beat my jack high. So I look at the pot, I calculate a bet size. I think $8,000 should get it done. Enough to price him out with all his hero calls, if you will, like the one he has here. But Dennis is just in a mood tonight, man. This guy just wants to kick my ass, and he did a good job of that. This hand was no exception. He makes the call with ace high, and we lose this pot as well. Lose around $10,000 in the process, lose a bunch of pride as Dennis shows me who the boss is. And we are still in the stand-up game, desperately trying to win a hand and avoid paying everyone. I think it was like $1,000 per player for the bounty. Yeah, guys, I've had better nights on Hustler Casino Live. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the last fun hand, if you could call them fun. I've got 9-5 in this one. The wheels have come off, or whatever that saying is. Not my proudest moment, but my only excuse was that the stand-up game was still on. So there's a raise to 600, a call from Henry, a call from Jungleman. I decide to put in the squeeze to $4,000. Not really caring about what my cards are at this point, just trying not to lose the stand-up game. But of course this is stupid, right? Because you're risking all this money in hopes of not losing more money. And that's not really a good scenario, even if, we do win. This is just too risky, too bad of a hand. But perhaps the frustration finally getting to me after 6 hours of things not going my way. Probably something I should work on. Anyway, I make it 4,000. Stu folds. He's a pre-flop raiser. That looks like good news to me. But then Henry calls and Jungleman calls. That's not good. But then the flop comes down 5 deuce deuce. I mean, that's pretty sweet, right? You get out of line pre-flop with 9-5 offsuit, but then you somehow flop top pair. That's great news, I think. I make it 4,000. It's unlikely we're up against a better hand. I'd imagine if these guys had pocket pairs, they probably would have re-raised pre-flop, unless they have like 6s or 7s. But how often is that going to happen, right? Henry gets out of the way. Jungleman, he jams all in for $10,000 more. Easiest call of my life here. Only losing to pocket 7s or pocket 6s, I'd imagine. Everything else is probably a bluff. But he does have 7s. So, yeah, that's not good. But who knows? We've gotten unlucky tonight. Maybe we can get lucky this one time and hit a 5 or a 9. No such luck. Instead, we lose this hand. It's funny because this is the moment I realized I should probably just stop trying to win the stand-up game. My fate is sealed. It's not meant to be, and yeah, I'm not going to lose any more money trying to win a pot. And then the very next hand, Stu ended up winning with, I don't even remember what. He had like king high or something, and I was dealt some garbage, decided not to pursue it, and lost the stand-up game as well. Absolutely miserable ending. We have to pay everyone the stand-up bounty, and then the next hand the stream ended. So yeah, guys, probably the most depressing session I've played at Hustler Casino Live. On that note, I hope you all enjoyed the hands. I hope you enjoyed the confessional booth, and stay tuned for some final thoughts, which I think you guys might want to hear this time around. All right, so I just got my ass kicked pretty bad. Worse than it's been in a long time. I get a lot of DMs and messages and stuff like that asking how to cope with downswings. So I'm gonna give you my 2 cents real quick, unless this card decides to hit me. And the way I handle it, at least, is despite how bad it hurts to lose a bunch of money, I try to remind myself that overall, big picture wise, I have a pretty sweet life. I have people who I love and hopefully love me. I have health. I live in Southern California, which is pretty awesome. And the list goes on, So anyway, without getting too corny, that's kind of my mental approach to try to sleep after nights like these. But on that note, I lost 150 and change. $150,000 in like 6 hours. I'm not gonna pretend that it doesn't affect me. That shit sucks. Especially when I was feeling good. I felt like it was gonna be a fun day, and
that's kind of how poker goes, you know? I've had many days where I feel terrible and then I end up winning a bunch afterwards. So I guess it doesn't count for much. But yeah, I lost a bunch of money, and that was the story of my night. I've definitely played better, but I also ran terrible. So those two things combined, you know, not playing well and running bad, you're gonna lose some money. And in a game like this, where there's a lot of variance and the stakes are high, it's gonna be a big chunk. And that was the case for me. I'm pretty sure I was the biggest loser tonight. And that's how it goes. Last time I played in the bounty game with Rampage, it was the opposite. I ran like the sun. I think I played well, and I won like 200K. Gave most of it back tonight, but yeah, so far for me, the bounty game has been very swingy. So I'm looking forward to the next one. Hopefully I can find some more cards and pick up a few more winning hands. I feel like I didn't have the winning hand too often. But that's it, guys. Before I ramble on too much, feeling sorry for myself, just wanted to showcase how my night went. This is the story of high stakes poker, you know, this is how it goes. It's not always fun. It's not always pretty. A lot of times it's pathetic, like me tonight. But that's all right. We push on, and hopefully we're gonna try to get some money back in the next few videos. I don't know though, this year has been very like this. Like every time I start to get things going, I have a night like this again. And yeah, it's been a whole lot of nothing going on for me. I'm like break even for the year. I know, poor me. Someone play me the world's smallest violin, right? But yeah, that's all I got tonight, guys. As always, thank you for watching. Thanks for the support. At least I got a free red tracksuit out of it. Questionable how I look in that, but yeah, life goes on. Until next time, guys, good luck at your local tables. Peace.